Buenas tardes de nuevo. Pues seguimos en este octavo update de ISADMU. Hemos tenido dos charlas interesantísimas en dermatología justo hace un segundo. Y ahora pasamos de la derma a la enfermedad inflamatoria intestinal. Y como digestólogo os aseguro que no podíamos tener un mejor ponente que el profesor Fernando Magro. Conocido por todos, seguro. Fernando, el profesor Magro, trabaja en Porto, en Portugal. Hace más de 30 años que se dedica a la enfermedad inflamatoria intestinal y ha ocupado diferentes cargos en la sociedad portuguesa, pero también en ECCO, la European Crohn's and Colitis Organization, en la cual en los últimos 20 años ha estado prácticamente en todos los comités, Comité Educational Committee, en el Governing Board y recientemente, hace un año, es el presidente de la ECCO. Por tanto, es de la persona que está guiando los destinos de cronicolitis, yo diría que a nivel mundial. Pocas personas nos pueden explicar más y mejor qué hay de nuevo, cómo debemos tratar en el año 2024 a nuestros pacientes con enfermedad de cronicolitis ulcerosa. Por tanto, os invito a escuchar muy atentamente, y es lo que voy a hacer yo también, la charla del profesor Fernando Magro sobre tratamiento en cronicolitis año 2024. Fernando, mil gracias por aceptar y te dejamos con la palabra.
Good morning, everyone. It is for me a great pleasure to be in this meeting. And it is for me indeed a great pleasure to have a talk in this hospital and to know that there is a multidisciplinary team in a private service to treat in the best way the IBD patients. My talk is about treatment targets in ulcerative colitis from histology to mucosal healing. And here you have my disclosures. And when we see ulcerative colitis patients, we only are looking for symptoms. However, beyond, we have endoscopic findings, histological findings, and also molecular findings. And you need to realize that the symptoms are only one part of the complex disease that is ulcerative colitis. And we know in some way the natural history of ulcerative colitis. In this systematic review of long-term outcomes in 17 longitudinal population-based cohorts involving roughly 15,000 of ulcerative colitis with 60 studies, the cumulative risk at 10 years of follow-up and the cumulative risk of relapse is between 70 to 80. The cumulative risk of hospitalization is from 40 to 66, and the cumulative risk of colectomy could reach 15%. So ulcerative colitis is a disabling disease. And if you look at the evolution of ulcerative colitis over time, indeed, the proportion of need of corticosteroids after 2005 remains the same. And that is the proportion of patients with at least one corticosteroids need per year. And it is unbelievable that this proportion reached 15% and remains stable over time. So you need to explore ulcerative colitis in another way. We know that the randomized clinical trials are exploring endpoints. And we start with a full Mayo score involving stool frequency, rectal bleeding, the global assessment, physician global assessment, and endoscopic score. Some trials now are exploring the partial Mayo score without endoscopic findings, or adapt Mayo score with endoscopic findings, stool frequency and rectal bleeding, but without the physician global assessment. And this makes sense. But now we have some trials exploring the partial adapt, that is only stool frequency and the rectal bleeding. But most of the studies ignore the importance of histological findings in ulcerative colitis. And you need to differentiate what is an endpoint, a target, and a goal. It is a question of language, but it is important. And endpoint is a clinical definition of a success at a predefined time point, and may have impact on disease scores and use for comparison in clinical trials and for regulatory approval. The target is a short-term ambition and must be achievable, will impact outcome, and if delivered, modifiable with therapeutic optimization. And the goal is a long-term ambition, is patient-defined or physician-defined. The STRIDE define some targets, clinical targets, biomarker targets as intermediate targets, endoscopic healing, but say that histological findings are not yet an target and a defined ambition target in ulcerative colitis. And I think it is a problem. And in my talk, I explore the importance of histology and my concepts about histology and the importance of histology in ulcerative colitis. We know that endoscopy impacts in outcome in ulcerative colitis. And this landmark study published in 2009 clearly shows a difference between patients that reached endoscopic healing when compared with those without endoscopic healing. So endoscopy and endoscopic findings impact in the long-term outcome in ulcerative colitis, namely, in this study, the need of surgery. However, we know also from some cohorts, this is from Italy, that clinical and endoscopic remission impacts in long-term outcome, here the clinical remission. But in this post-hoc analysis of the Gemini 1 study, we know that clinical remission impacts in the outcome at week 52, also endoscopic improvement, histological remission, and histological remission defined by Roberts and Gibbs. But look at the importance of fecal calprotectin. And those with a fecal calprotectin below 250 had a reduction of colectomy of 70%. And a 42% reduction in the risk of hospitalization. So, in this post-hoc analysis of the Gemini 1 study, it is clear that fecal calprotectin impacts in the outcome in ulcerative colitis patients. And we know that fecal calprotectin levels are increased when neutrophils are present in the epithelium and the intestinal mucosa has erosions or ulcers, regardless of the scoring system used. In other words, if the patient has neutrophils in the epithelium, erosions, and ulcers, fecal calprotectin is increased, and the presence of neutrophils in the epithelium is the main marker of histologic activity. So there is a relationship between fecal calprotectin and histology. But we know also that there is some disagreement between endoscopic findings, clinical findings, and histological findings. Look at the measure of remission when we evaluated clinical, endoscopic, or histological remission. And the concordance between clinical findings and histological findings is only 81%, and the concordance between endoscopic findings and histological findings was 75%. So we could have patients with normal endoscopy, 0 or 1, but with still histological inflammation or activity. And the question, it is clear for me, we could have patients with severe endoscopic findings and with histological activity, no problems, it is clear, but we could have patients with endoscopic minus 0 or 1 and with neutrophils in the epithelium or in the lamina propria, that is, with persistent histological activity. And I think we have a rationale for histological findings, and we have measurement tools, namely Gibbs, Nancy, or Robert score, and we have support in terms of retrospective studies, and we are waiting for more robust prospective studies. But a language is always a big problem in science and in life. And this physics shows or claims that if you can't explain some things in simple terms, you don't understand it. And I think it was the problem with histology. And the language is a big problem because the pathologists are speaking the same language. That is, all pathologists are speaking the same language, and my answer is no. Are clinicians and pathologists speaking the same language? And my answer is no. So you need to put pathologists and gastroenterologists speaking the same language. And it is wide accept that cryptitis, crypt abscess, neutrophils in the epithelium, and erosions and ulcerations are related with histological activity. And the debate is the lamina propria neutrophils. And it is controversial the presence of eosinophils or basal plasmacytosis. And the gastroenterologist and pathologist in the same table by ECCO on behalf of ECCO wrote the ECCO position paper. And in this paper, it is clear that neutrophils are not normally present within the lamina propria or epithelium, and the histological activity is defined by neutrophils infiltration of epithelium or lamina propria. And eosinophils alone should not be used as a marker of histological activity in ulcerative colitis, and basal plasmacytosis may predict disease relapse in ulcerative colitis, although the evidence is not consistent. Indeed, there are some studies in favor and some studies against. And the next point to follow the importance of histological activity is the clinical implication of histological remission in ulcerative colitis. Look at this meta-analysis. Mayo score of 1 is different from Mayo score of 0, we know. And patients achieving a mucosal healing of Mayo score 0 have a 52 lower risk of clinical relapse. But what about patients with Mayo score of 0 and persistent histological activity, and patients with Mayo score of 0 without histological remission? They have different outcome, and we know the answer. And you know that patients achieving histological remission have a 63 lower risk of clinical relapse. So, if our patient is Mayo 0 and neutrophils in the epithelium, the likelihood of clinical relapse is higher by 63. And in this prospective study that analyzed the value of histological remission versus endoscopic remission for predicting corticosteroids use, colectomy, and hospitalization in ulcerative colitis patients over a median of 6 years, those with endo remission and histoactivity have different outcome when compared with those with histo and endoscopic remission. And the outcome was different in terms of patients' requirement oral corticosteroids or patients requiring hospitalization. And it was shown in several retrospective studies, and this is a study over 6 years of follow-up, that corticosteroids requirements, hospitalization, and colectomy was different over time in those with histological activity when compared with those without histological activity. And another question, and important clinical question, is the success of de-intensification is higher in those without histological activity, and also the risk of dysplasia is higher in those with histological activity. And 2 studies showed these findings and are important findings. And in this recent study from the Leuven group showed the relationship between IVD disc and disability and histological activity. Those with lower score in IVD disc have more histological remission than those with higher IBD score. So histology impacts also in the disability of our patients. So, dear colleagues, to summarize, histology is related with reduced clinical relapse, reduce the need of corticosteroids, lower hospitalization rates, and lower colectomies. And it is important to score our patients to know the histological activity and to have an idea of the outcome of our patients. And what about the clinical remission and clinical implications after induction? And look at these network meta-analysis. It was sent for publications, and we compared several drugs. And etrasimod reached the highest score for histological remission, followed by ozanimod, by filgotinib, by vedo, and mirikizumab. So it is possible to reach histological remission after induction. It is the first question. And we know that histological remission after induction is related with outcome. In this sub-analysis of the varsity study on the multivariate analysis, improvement of neutrophils in the epithelium was the one histological parameter associated with the increased odds of endoscopic improvement and histoendoscopic mucosal improvement after 1 year of treatment with vedolizumab. But what about mirikizumab? You know that mira is anti-IL-12, IL-23 interleukin, anti-interleukin. And we know that at week 12 is related with outcome after 1 year. And the endpoint at week 12 of histological improvement, histological remission, and endoscopic remission is related after 1 year of treatment with histoendoscopic mucosal improvement and histoendoscopic mucosal remission, as we could see here. So, treat our patients with different drugs and different mechanisms of action. If you reached histological remission or improvement, this impacts outcome of our patients. And here we could see the patients achieving clinical or symptomatic outcome at week 40 based on week 12 histoendoscopic outcomes. And it is very clear that at week 12 histoendoscopic mucosal improvement impacts in corticosteroid-free remission, in clinical remission, in symptomatic remission, impacts also in the quality of life of our patients and in bowel urgency, a new endpoint in randomized control trials. We know clear that now we have a new concept in ulcerative colitis. And the new concept is disease clearance. What is disease clearance? Disease clearance is a new concept, and the patient should have, I would like to say, must have clinical remission, endoscopic remission by 0, and histological remission. And in this study from Milan, if the patient reached disease clearance within 12 weeks of treatment with different drugs, had different outcome after 1 year, and disease clearance impacts in the outcome of ulcerative colitis patients. So disease clearance is a new concept, is a composite outcome, and we should reach disease clearance because in Crohn's disease, we know that treating earlier impacts in the outcome, not in ulcerative colitis, but reaching disease clearance in ulcerative colitis impacts in the outcome. And what is new in histology nowadays? We know that AI is starting to explore histology. And if you certify the patient's ENANCY score of 0 and 1 and more than 1, that is histological remission and histological activity certified by Nancy, there is a high concordance between AI and the pathologist. And it is a very important and relevant message because AI could help us in harmonization and standardization histological findings. I'm also involved in this project. It's a multinational project of AI in histology, and indeed, it is possible to have a high concordance between AI and the pathologist findings in terms of neutrophils and eosinophils. But I'd like to show you the potential of AI exploring the histology. Here are images of AI looking for neutrophils, looking for eosinophils, looking for lymphocytes. And it is possible to count these at a histological level related them with the outcome of our project. It's an amazing project, and it is new in histology. So, dear colleagues, we are now approaching, I think, a new area, coming from clinical symptoms and going to histological healing. But we have more and more. That is intestinal barrier. And if you reach intestinal barrier normalization, we could have different outcomes in ulcerative colitis and also in Crohn's disease. And it was depicted in this study, different outcomes in those that reached intestinal barrier healing. But looking at a molecular level, and it was performed molecular level analysis in mirikizumab study, and after 12 weeks of treatment, and it was possible to show an increase of aquaporin 8 at a water transporter after treatment. And it is clear in this study that we have an increase of the genes related with the recovering of the epithelial lining and barrier integrity, and an increase also in the genes related with protecting epithelial cells from oxidative injury. And we have a decrease of the genes related with chemotaxis, with oxidative stress, and with the gems related with damage of epithelial barrier. So we are now approaching a new stage, that is molecular healing. And now our aim is a holistic remission in ulcerative colitis. And we claiming for holistic remission and explore the patients in terms of symptoms, objective markers as endoscopy, histology, and biomarkers, and improving the quality of life of our patients. So, dear colleagues, histological remission is a meaningful outcome in ulcerative colitis. Histological changes tend to be lag behind clinical remission of the ulcerative colitis treatment. Endoscopic healing is not an absolutely indicator of histological healing. Drugs for ulcerative colitis treatment are able to induce endoscopic response and remission, and histological remission is an independent predictor of ulcerative colitis. Thanks for your attention.
Pues muchas gracias, doctor Magro. La verdad es que ha sido una presentación fabulosa y vamos a continuar con nuestro octavo update.